The sun was high over the red hills when Daniel Moore first rode into the dry valley. He was a quiet man from Texas, a traveler who had seen too much war and wanted only peace. His horse was thin, his hat dusty, and his eyes held a tired kindness that people noticed even before he spoke. He was looking for work or a reason to stay in a place that didn't judge him for his past. The valley he found was home to the Apache tribe, a proud people who had lived there for generations. Daniel didn't mean to disturb them. He just needed water and maybe a patch of land where he could rest. The chief, a tall man with long gray hair and calm eyes, watched him from a distance. His name was Chief Tosawi, and he carried himself with quiet power. When Daniel approached the stream, he dismounted, took off his hat and greeted the air with respect, the way his mother had taught him when meeting strangers. The Apache men around him didn't lower their bows, but they saw no threat in his posture. Daniel waited until the chief stepped forward. "You are not from this land," the chief said, his voice deep but steady. "No, sir," Daniel answered gently. "I'm just passing through. I mean no harm." The chief studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "You may drink. You may rest. But stay near the water." Daniel smiled slightly and thanked him. He drank from the stream, letting the cool water wash away days of dust. For the first time in months, he felt peace settling in his chest. That night, he camped nearby. The stars above were sharp and endless, the air still. He heard distant songs from the Apache camp, soft chants around a fire that rose like smoke into the night sky. He didn't understand the words, but something in the rhythm spoke to him of home, of belonging, of people who lived by honor. The next morning, the chief's daughter, Nia, came with 2 others to bring food. She was graceful, quiet, and strong in her movements. Daniel thanked her, trying not to stare too long at her calm brown eyes. She nodded but didn't smile. Still, when she left, she glanced back once, just once. It was enough to stay in his mind all day. Days passed. Daniel helped wherever he could, repairing fences, moving stones from the stream, or fixing old tools. The Apache watched him carefully, but over time they saw he worked honestly. Children began to follow him, laughing when he made little wooden toys for them. The women nodded at him when he carried water. Even the chief noticed. One afternoon, while Daniel was fixing a broken cart, Nia approached again. She brought him a bowl of stew. "You work like you belong here," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "I don't belong anywhere," he replied. Nia tilted her head. "Maybe that will change." It was the first time she spoke more than a few words to him, and her voice carried something that made Daniel's heart shift. But peace never lasted long in those lands. A hard season came, a sickness spread through the valley. It started among the horses, then the children. Daniel had seen something like it before. He remembered herbs and roots his mother used on their farm when his brother fell ill. He spoke to the chief about it. Tosawi listened but said nothing for a while. Finally, he nodded. "If you can help my people, you will have my trust." Daniel spent days riding to nearby hills, gathering plants, boiling water, crushing leaves. He showed the women how to make the medicine. Slowly, the fevers began to drop. The tribe's worry softened into relief. The chief came to him one evening, his face lit by the firelight. "You helped us," he said. "Why?" Daniel looked into the flames. "Because no one helped my people when we needed it. I couldn't walk away this time." The chief put a hand on his shoulder. "You have a good heart, Daniel Moore." When the sickness ended, the valley returned to life. The tribe held a feast of thanks. Daniel sat quietly near the fire, watching the dancers move with the beat of drums. Nia danced too, her hair flowing behind her like a river of dark silk. When her eyes found Daniel's across the fire, she smiled for the first time, and he smiled back. But before the peace could last, trouble came from outside the valley. A group of traders from the nearby town accused the tribe of stealing cattle. The chief denied it, but anger spread fast. The traders planned to drive the tribe from the land. Daniel overheard their talk in the saloon one night. He couldn't let that happen. The next morning, he rode back to the valley and told the chief everything. Tosawi listened in silence, then looked toward the hills where his people's ancestors rested. "They want what is not theirs," he said quietly. Daniel suggested proof, showing that the stolen cattle had been taken by wild rustlers who moved along the river. The chief agreed, and Daniel offered to find the evidence himself. He spent 2 days tracking prints through the dust until he found the truth. The traders had hired men to steal their own cattle, planning to blame the Apache. Daniel brought back the marks, the brands, and the names. When the sheriff from town arrived, Daniel stood beside the chief and presented the truth. The crowd fell silent as the lies came undone. The traders had no defense. The sheriff cleared the tribe's name and ordered peace. The chief turned to Daniel with pride. "You saved my tribe," he said. "You stood beside us when no one else did." Daniel only shook his head. "I did what was right." The old man smiled, his face lined with wisdom and gratitude. "Right is not always easy. You are a man of honor, Daniel Moore." That night, as the fire burned bright and drums echoed again, Chief Tosawi stood before his people. He called Daniel forward, and every eye turned to the stranger who had become a friend. The chief's voice carried through the still night air. "This man came to us as a wanderer. He brought no harm, only help. He saved our children, our land, and our name. He is now a brother of the Apache." Daniel stood speechless, feeling a weight he didn't deserve but couldn't deny. Then the chief looked toward his daughter, who stood near the fire, her eyes glistening with quiet joy. The old man placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder again. "You saved my tribe," the chief said slowly, his words full of meaning. "Now I approve you to have my daughter as a wife." The camp fell silent for a heartbeat. Daniel felt his breath stop. He looked at Nia, who was already looking at him, not with surprise, but with calm acceptance, as if she had known this moment would come. The chief continued, "It is the will of our hearts and the will of the Great Spirit that two people who brought peace to this valley should walk the same path." Daniel tried to speak, but no words came. He had never expected such honor. He had never thought love would find him here, in this quiet land surrounded by red hills and soft wind. Nia stepped closer, her smile gentle. "You belong here now," she whispered. The drums began again, slow and deep, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The firelight flickered over their faces as the tribe sang. The stars above seemed closer than ever, as if the heavens themselves had bent low to bless the union forming beneath them. For Daniel Moore, the wanderer who sought only peace, the valley had given him more than he ever dreamed. Home, honor, and love that asked for nothing but truth. And for the Apache, the stranger had become one of them, not by blood but by heart. The following morning was calm, as if the land itself knew that something sacred had happened. The Apache Valley glowed softly in the light of dawn, and Daniel Moore woke to the sound of gentle singing from the nearby camp. He lay still for a moment, listening, feeling the peace that had long escaped him finally settle in his heart. When he stepped outside, he saw Chief Tosawi standing by the fire, talking quietly with the elders. The chief's daughter, Nia, was beside her mother, preparing the morning meal. Daniel hesitated before walking closer. Nia looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that said everything without a word. The chief turned as Daniel approached. "Today is a new beginning," he said simply. "You will join our family and our people will welcome you as one of their own." Daniel nodded humbly. "It is an honor, Chief. I will do everything I can to live worthy of your trust." That day was filled with preparation. The women gathered flowers from the meadows, weaving them into garlands. The men painted the wooden poles that marked the center of the celebration ground. Children ran between them, laughing, their voices carrying like wind over the hills. Daniel watched it all with quiet awe. He had never seen such unity, such respect for simple beauty. He helped wherever he could, carrying baskets, mending a drum, or setting up the benches. The tribe no longer looked at him as a stranger. He was part of them now. When night came, the sky filled with stars once again. A great fire was lit in the center of the camp. The people sat in a wide circle, their faces warm in the glow. The chief stood, lifting his hand for silence. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate not only the safety of our people but also the joining of two hearts that brought peace to this valley. Daniel Moore, the wanderer from the plains, will now become one with our family. Nia, daughter of Tosawi, will walk beside him as wife and partner. Together they will carry the spirit of both our worlds." Daniel felt his throat tighten as he stepped forward. Nia stood beside him, calm and graceful, her dark hair braided with white feathers. The chief spoke blessings in his native tongue, words that sounded like wind over water. Daniel didn't know the meaning, but he felt their truth in his chest. When the ceremony ended, the drums began again. The people sang, their voices rising into the open night. Nia took Daniel's hand, leading him to dance. At first he stumbled, unused to the rhythm, but she guided him with a gentle laugh. Soon he found himself moving with the beat, his worries forgotten. Later, as the fire burned low, Daniel and Nia sat a little apart, watching the sparks float up into the sky. "Do you miss your old home?" Nia asked quietly. Daniel thought for a moment. "Home was never a place for me," he said softly. "It was a feeling I never found. Until now," Nia smiled. "Then stay. This land welcomes you." He reached for her hand, and for a long time they simply sat together, listening to the music fade into the sound of the wind. Days turned into weeks, and life in the valley settled into a calm rhythm. Daniel built a small cabin near the stream with help from Nia's brothers. He learned the tribe's ways, how to track deer without leaving footprints, how to read the clouds before the rain, how to show respect to the spirits of the land. The chief often visited him, sharing stories of his youth and lessons of leadership. Daniel listened carefully, learning that strength was not shown through pride but through patience. Nia taught him the Apache language, word by word. They laughed often when he mispronounced something, but she always encouraged him. Slowly he began to speak with confidence. The elders smiled when they heard him trying. It showed respect for their world. One evening, the tribe gathered again for a celebration of the harvest. Daniel had helped collect the crops and had even carved new tools from wood. The chief stood before the people and spoke proudly of unity, how two paths had joined to make the valley stronger. But Daniel's greatest joy was seeing Nia happy. She moved among the people with kindness and warmth. Children adored her, and the elders often sought her help. She carried the spirit of her people with grace, and Daniel felt grateful every time he looked at her. Still, there were challenges. Some people from the nearby town did not understand the bond between Daniel and the Apache. They whispered unkind things or avoided him when he came to trade supplies. Daniel ignored them, focusing on his work and his family. When he returned home each evening, Nia was there to greet him, her smile washing away the day's troubles. They shared simple meals, talked under the stars, and dreamed about the future. As the seasons changed, so did the valley. The hills turned green after the rains, and wildflowers spread across the plains. Daniel planted a small garden outside their cabin. He and Nia often worked together, their laughter echoing over the water. One day, the chief visited them again. He was older now, his steps slower, but his eyes still bright. "You have brought peace to this place, Daniel Moore," he said. "When I am gone, remember that this land is also yours. Protect it. Keep our ways alive." Daniel bowed his head. "I promise, Chief." The old man smiled faintly. "You are not just my son by law, but by spirit. My daughter chose well." After the chief left, Nia sat beside Daniel and said softly, "He believes in you." Daniel looked toward the mountains. "I only did what anyone with a heart would do." Nia shook her head gently. "Not everyone does what is right. That is why he respects you." Years passed quietly. Daniel and Nia's love grew stronger with every sunrise. They had a son and later a daughter. The tribe adored the children, calling them the bridge between two worlds. The valley flourished under peace. Travelers came and went, but few disturbed the land's quiet balance. Daniel grew into a respected figure, not by title, but by deed. He became the man people turned to when something needed fixing or when decisions had to be made. He never sought power, only fairness. The lessons of the chief guided him always. Sometimes, when the nights were long, Daniel would sit by the fire with his son and tell the story of how he came to the valley. He spoke of kindness, courage, and how one simple act of help could change an entire life. His children listened with wide eyes, never tiring of the tale. When Chief Tosawi passed away peacefully one winter, the tribe mourned deeply. Daniel helped lead the ceremony with great respect. Standing before the people, he said softly, "He taught me what it means to belong. He gave me a family, and I will carry his wisdom as long as I live." The people nodded, for they knew he meant every word. After that, Daniel and Nia became the quiet pillars of the valley. They didn't seek glory or wealth. Their happiness came from the life they built, simple, honest, and filled with love. Every morning, Daniel still rose early to fetch water from the stream where he had first met the tribe. Sometimes he would stop and watch the reflection of the hills in the water. He would remember the man he once was, a lonely wanderer, and feel gratitude for how far he had come. Nia would join him, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. You still look at this valley the same way you did years ago, she would tease. Daniel smiled. It's hard not to. This land gave me everything. She leaned her head on his shoulder. And you gave it peace. The sun would rise behind them, painting the valley in gold, and Daniel would whisper, I only followed my heart. As years went on, travelers sometimes came through the valley and asked about the old story, the one about the man who saved the Apache tribe and married the chief's daughter. Daniel would only smile and say, it wasn't about saving anyone. It was about finding where I belonged. The visitors would leave, but the story would stay, carried by the wind over the red hills, passed down from one generation to another. And every time the people of the valley told it, they would end the same way, repeating the words spoken long ago under the stars. You saved my tribe. Now I approve you to have my daughter as a wife. Those words, spoken with honor and gratitude, became part of the valley's soul, proof that kindness, respect, and courage could unite even the most distant hearts. And so, Daniel Moore, the quiet wanderer, became a legend not because of fame or power, but because he chose to love a people and a place with his whole heart, and was loved in return for it forever.